If you ever found something valuable that wasn't yours, would you keep it, or would you risk everything to give it back? The city hums far below, a distant, endless current of headlights and ambition. But up here, 43 floors above Manhattan, everything feels different, quieter, almost unreal, like the world has been carefully filtered to only show perfection. Sophie Bennett stands alone in the middle of the penthouse, her worn sneakers silent against polished marble floors that reflect the golden glow of recessed lighting. Her breath shallow as she takes in the space around her, every surface immaculate, every object placed with intention, a world she knows she doesn't belong to. And yet for the next 2 hours, it's her responsibility to make it shine even brighter. She adjusts the thin cleaning gloves on her hands, the latex snapping softly against her skin, and pulls her hoodie sleeves up just enough to keep them from getting wet. Her movements careful, practiced, almost invisible, because that's what this job requires, to exist without leaving a trace. She moves from room to room with quiet efficiency, wiping down glass walls that overlook Central Park, straightening cushions that cost more than her entire month's rent, her eyes occasionally catching her own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, a reminder of the contrast she tries not to think about. Her thrift store clothes, the faint scuff on her left shoe, the exhaustion tucked beneath her eyes from working back-to-back shifts. She exhales slowly, focusing instead on the task, because thinking too much is a luxury she can't afford. Not with overdue bills sitting on her kitchen counter and her younger brother's college acceptance letter still pinned to the fridge like a promise she's not sure she can keep. She reaches the living area, where a low, sculptural coffee table holds a single object. A crystal decanter, delicate, flawless, catching the light in a way that makes it look almost unreal. And beside it, a watch, sleek, understated, but unmistakably expensive, the kind of piece you don't even have to recognize by brand to know it's worth more than everything in her bank account combined. Sophie hesitates for just a second, her hand hovering above the surface as she prepares to clean around it, careful not to disturb anything. Because people like the owner of this place notice details, they expect perfection, and mistakes aren't forgiven easily. She reaches for the cloth, gently wiping the edge of the table, her focus narrowing, until her elbow brushes the decanter. The sound is small, almost delicate, but in the silence of the penthouse, it feels deafening as the crystal tips, then falls, shattering against the marble floor into a scatter of glittering fragments that seem to freeze time itself. Sophie's heart stops, her body going rigid as the reality crashes over her in a single, overwhelming wave. She stares down at the broken pieces, her reflection fractured in each shard, her mind racing through possibilities. Pretend it wasn't her. Say it was already like this. Walk away and hope no one ever traces it back. But then her eyes drift, almost instinctively, to the corner of the ceiling, where a small, nearly invisible black lens catches the light. A camera. Her breath catches in her throat as she realizes, with a sinking certainty, that someone might have seen everything. Somewhere, someone could be watching her right now. The silence stretches, heavy, suffocating, as Sophie slowly kneels down, her fingers trembling as she gathers the broken pieces, each one sharp, each one a reminder of how quickly things can fall apart. She closes her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling deeply, because this is the moment that decides everything. Not just the job, not just the paycheck she desperately needs, but something deeper, something harder to explain. When she opens her eyes again, there's a quiet resolve in them as she stands, walks to her bag, and pulls out her wallet, the thin leather creased from years of use. And inside it, folded carefully, is every dollar she has left after rent. She hesitates, just for a second, her fingers tightening around the bills, before placing them gently on the table next to the shattered remains, then grabbing a small notepad from her cleaning kit. Her handwriting is neat, but slightly shaky as she writes, "I'm so sorry. This was my fault. I can't afford to replace it, but this is everything I have. I'll find a way to pay the rest." She sets the note down, smoothing it out with her palm, then looks around the penthouse one last time, as if memorizing it, before turning back to the broken glass, her movements steady now as she finishes cleaning, not erasing the mistake, but owning it. And high above, behind a screen glowing faintly in the dim light of another room, A man who had planned to watch just another routine cleaning shift leans forward for the first time, his expression shifting in a way he doesn't quite understand. Because this wasn't what he expected at all. The elevator doors slide open with a soft chime, and Sophie steps inside, her reflection staring back at her from the mirrored walls, smaller somehow, quieter, like the city has already started to forget her existence. Her hands are still faintly trembling. Even as she presses the button for the lobby, her mind replaying the moment over and over again, the sound of glass breaking, the stillness that followed, the unmistakable awareness that she had been seen, judged, recorded. She swallows hard, trying to steady her breathing as the elevator descends, each passing floor ticking down like a countdown she cannot stop. Because once those doors open, everything changes. By the time she reaches the ground level, the polished confidence she forces onto her face feels fragile, like it could crack at any second. But she keeps walking anyway, past the marble reception desk, past the doorman who barely glances her way, and out into the cool Manhattan air where the noise of traffic rushes back in, grounding her in reality. The evening chill seeps through her thin hoodie, but she barely notices as she walks 3 blocks to the bus stop, her mind drifting to the envelope of cash she left behind. Every dollar she had carefully saved now sitting on someone else's table, a silent confession she cannot take back. She sinks onto the cold metal bench, pulling her sleeves over her hands, watching as people pass by in tailored coats and polished shoes, their lives moving forward without hesitation, without fear of a single mistake unraveling everything. A bus pulls up with a loud hiss, but she does not move, not yet, because she is not ready to go home. Not ready to face the empty refrigerator, the unpaid bills, the quiet weight of responsibility waiting for her. Instead, she reaches into her pocket and pulls out her phone, the cracked screen flickering to life as she scrolls through her messages, her thumb pausing on one from her younger brother, sent earlier that morning. Got the acceptance letter today? I wish Mom could see this. Her chest tightens, a mix of pride and pressure settling in, because now more than ever, she knows she cannot afford to lose this job, and yet deep down, she already knows she probably has. Across the city, in a dimly lit office overlooking the same skyline, Daniel Whitmore does not move from his chair, his eyes fixed on the paused frame of a security feed, Sophie standing beside the shattered decanter, her shoulders tense, her expression caught between fear and something else he cannot quite name. He rewinds the footage, watching again as she notices the camera, as the realization settles in, as the moment stretches long enough for her to make a choice. He has seen this scene play out more times than he can count. Different employees, different faces, but always the same outcome. Denial, excuses, quiet attempts to hide the mistake, sometimes even indifference, as if the cost of the damage meant nothing to them. But this time, it is different. He watches her walk to her bag, watches her hesitate over her wallet, and for a brief moment, he expects her to stop, to put it away, to choose herself over the consequences. Instead, she places every dollar on the table without hesitation, as if the decision, once made, is absolute. Daniel leans back slightly, his jaw tightening as something unfamiliar settles in his chest, something that feels uncomfortably close to respect. His assistant's voice breaks the silence from behind him. Do you want me to flag her for termination? He does not answer right away, his gaze still locked on the screen where Sophie is now carefully cleaning up the broken glass, not rushing, not cutting corners, as if even in failure. She refuses to do anything halfway. He exhales slowly, then reaches forward, tapping the screen to zoom in on the small note she left behind. The handwriting is simple, honest, unpolished, and somehow that makes it feel more real. I will find a way to pay the rest. He reads it twice, then a third time, before finally speaking, his voice quiet but certain. No, do not terminate her. His assistant hesitates, clearly surprised, but nods anyway. Daniel's eyes drift back to the footage one last time before he closes the screen, the faint reflection of the city lights flickering across his face as a new thought takes shape, not fully formed yet, but persistent, insistent, because for the first time in a long time, he is not thinking about the cost of what was broken, but about the person who chose to take responsibility for it, even when it cost her everything. The next morning arrives too quickly. gray light slipping through the thin curtains of Sophie's small apartment as the sound of a passing garbage truck rattles the window, pulling her from a restless sleep she never fully settled into. She lies still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, her mind already racing ahead to the inevitable, the call, the email, the quiet dismissal that will follow. Because people like her do not get second chances in places like that. She exhales slowly and pushes herself up, the floor cold beneath her feet as she moves through her routine on autopilot, brushing her hair, tying it back, pulling on the same worn jeans and hoodie, every movement deliberate, controlled, as if holding herself together depends on it. In the kitchen, she pauses in front of the fridge, her eyes landing on the acceptance letter again, the bold university logo standing out against the white paper. A promise that feels both beautiful and impossibly heavy. She reaches out and smooths it with her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. I will figure it out, before grabbing her bag and heading out the door. The bus ride feels longer than usual, every stop stretching the tension tighter in her chest, every passing block bringing her closer to whatever waits on the other side of this day. When she finally steps into the lobby of the building, the air feels different, sharper somehow, like the space itself knows something she does not. The receptionist glances up briefly, then back down at her screen, offering no sign of what is coming, and Sophie forces herself to keep walking, past the marble floors, toward the service elevator, her heart beating louder with every step. As the doors close behind her, she grips the strap of her bag tightly, her reflection in the metal surface looking back at her, with a quiet determination that surprises even her, because despite everything, she still showed up. 43 floors later, the elevator opens, and the hallway stretches out in front of her, silent, pristine, unchanged, as if yesterday never happened. She walks toward the penthouse door, her steps slowing just slightly as she reaches for the handle, bracing herself for what she expects to find. Maybe a manager waiting, maybe a notice, maybe nothing at all. The door opens with a soft click, and she steps inside, her breath catching almost immediately as her eyes land on the living area. The broken decanter is gone, every shard cleared away, the marble floor flawless once again, and in its place, sitting neatly on the table, is the envelope she left behind. Sophie freezes, her pulse quickening as she takes a cautious step forward, her mind racing through possibilities, confusion mixing with a flicker of something she does not dare to name yet. She reaches the table and stares down at the envelope, untouched, exactly where she left it. Except now there is something else beside it, a small, folded card. Her fingers hesitate for a brief second before she picks it up, unfolding it slowly, her eyes scanning the simple, clean handwriting that greets her. You forgot something. Her breath catches as she looks back at the envelope, then at the note again, the words echoing in her mind. Not accusatory, not angry, just calm. She glances around the room instinctively, a strange awareness settling over her, as if she is not alone, as if someone, somewhere, is still watching. In another part of the building, Daniel stands near the window of a private office, his gaze fixed not on the skyline this time, but on a live feed displayed on a tablet in his hand. Sophie standing in the penthouse, holding the note, her expression a mixture of confusion and guarded hope. He watches the way she does not reach for the money immediately, the way she looks around first, trying to understand, trying to make sense of a situation that no longer fits the outcome she expected. His grip tightens slightly on the edge of the device, a quiet tension building beneath his composed exterior. Because this moment matters more than he is willing to admit. He had not planned to intervene, not like this, but something about the way she chose yesterday, the way she gave everything without knowing who was watching, shifted something in him that logic alone cannot explain. His assistant's voice comes through softly from behind him. Should I inform her about the situation? Daniel does not answer right away, his eyes still on Sophie as she carefully sets the note back down, her fingers brushing the edge of the envelope but not opening it. Not yet. He exhales slowly, then shakes his head once, his voice low but decisive. Not yet. I want to see what she does next. For a long moment, Sophie does not move, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the envelope as if it might disappear the second she touches it. Her mind caught between disbelief and caution, because nothing about this feels normal, Not the untouched money, not the note, not the quiet sense that this is not over yet. She slowly pulls her hand back instead of opening it, her jaw tightening slightly as a different thought settles in, one that feels steadier, more grounded than hope, because hope is dangerous when you have too much to lose. She exhales softly and picks up her cleaning cloth instead, turning away from the table as if the envelope can wait, as if whatever this is does not change the fact that she still has a job to do, at least for now. She moves through the penthouse with the same careful precision as always, wiping surfaces, straightening edges, restoring order. But there is a quiet tension beneath her movements now, an awareness she cannot shake, like she is being studied, measured, her choices observed in ways she cannot fully see. Every now and then, her eyes flick briefly toward the corners of the ceiling, not out of fear exactly, but out of understanding, because she knows now that someone is watching, and that knowledge changes everything. In the private office upstairs, Daniel notices the shift immediately. The way she chooses not to open the envelope, the way she continues working instead of reacting. And something about that choice draws him in even further, because it is not what he expected, not from someone in her position. Most people would have grabbed the money without hesitation, taken it as a sign of forgiveness, or at least relief. But she does not. She treats it like a question that has not been answered yet. He leans slightly against the edge of his desk, his gaze steady, his mind turning over the possibilities. The quiet calculations that have guided him for years, now suddenly feeling less certain, less useful in a situation that refuses to follow. Message is not about the money at all. Her fingers tighten slightly around the envelope before she sets it back down, her decision made, not out of certainty, but out of instinct. She reaches into her bag once more, pulling out her notepad again, and after a brief pause, she begins to write, her handwriting steadier this time, more intentional. I did not forget. I left it because it was the right thing to do. If there is more I owe, please tell me how to repay it properly. She places the note beside the first one, her movements calm, deliberate, as if she is answering a question she cannot hear out loud. Upstairs, Daniel reads the new message in silence, his expression unreadable at first, but something shifts behind his eyes, something subtle but undeniable, because this is no longer just about a mistake or a test. It is about a line she refuses to cross. Even when given permission to step back, he exhales slowly, a quiet realization settling in as he straightens, his voice low but firm when he finally speaks. Prepare a meeting. His assistant pauses, surprised by the sudden change in tone. With her? Daniel nods once, his gaze still fixed on the screen. Yes, it is time she stops being watched. The knock comes just as Sophie is finishing the last section of the hallway. A soft, deliberate sound that immediately pulls her attention toward the door, her body tensing slightly as she straightens up, her mind already racing through possibilities because no one ever knocks during a shift unless something is wrong. She wipes her hands quickly on her cloth before walking over, her steps measured, controlled, but her pulse quietly picking up with each one. When she opens the door, she is met, not with a manager or a security guard, but a man she has never seen before, dressed simply in a tailored charcoal coat. His posture relaxed but composed in a way that suggests he belongs here far more than she ever could. For a brief second, neither of them speaks, and Sophie becomes suddenly aware of every detail. The way his gaze studies her without being intrusive, the calm confidence in his stance, the quiet authority that does not need to be announced. You must be Sophie, he says finally, his voice even, steady, carrying just enough weight to make it clear this is not a casual encounter. She blinks once, caught off guard, but nods anyway, her grip tightening slightly on the edge of the door. Yes, I am, her voice careful, respectful, but guarded. He glances past her briefly, taking in the immaculate state of the penthouse, then returns his attention to her. I was hoping we could talk for a moment, he adds, not as a command, but not quite as a request either. Sophie hesitates. Instinct telling her this is the moment she has been waiting for, the conversation she has been bracing herself for since yesterday. And yet something about his tone does not match the outcome she expected. She steps aside slowly, allowing him to enter, her eyes following him as he moves into the living area, his presence shifting the atmosphere in a way she cannot fully explain. He stops near the table where the envelope and notes still sit, his gaze lingering on them for just a second before he turns back to her. "You left this," he says, gesturing lightly toward the money. Sophie straightens slightly, her shoulders pulling back as she meets his eyes. "I did," she replies, her voice steady now, grounded in the decision she already made. "It was my responsibility," she adds, not defensively, but with quiet certainty. The man studies her for a moment, as if weighing her words against something unseen, then nods slowly. "And when it was returned to you, you left it again," he continues, his tone thoughtful rather than accusatory. Sophie exhales softly, her gaze flicking briefly toward the envelope before returning to him. "Because nothing changed," she says simply. "I still broke it, and I still owe for it." Her fingers curl slightly at her sides, not out of fear, but out of conviction. A faint shift crosses his expression then, something subtle but unmistakable, as if her answer confirms something he was not entirely sure of until now. He steps a little closer, though still keeping a respectful distance, his voice lowering just slightly. "Most people would have taken the money and considered the matter closed," he says. Sophie gives a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Most people do not have to live with the consequences after they walk away," she replies, her words quiet but firm. "I do," she adds, and for the first time, there is a hint of vulnerability beneath her composure, not weakness, but honesty. The room falls silent for a moment, the city noise far below barely audible, as the weight of her words lingers between them. Then, slowly, the man reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a small card, holding it between his fingers before offering it to her. Sophie hesitates before taking it, her eyes dropping to the name printed in clean, sharp lettering. And for a brief second, the world seems to narrow around that single detail. When she looks back up at him, something in her expression has changed, a flicker of realization beginning to form as he finally speaks again, his voice calm, measured, but carrying a truth that shifts everything. "My name is Daniel Whitmore, and this is my home." The words settle between them like a shift in gravity, quiet but undeniable, and for a moment Sophie does not react, her eyes fixed on the card in her hand as if reading it again might somehow change what it says. But it does not. The name remains the same, Daniel Whitmore, and with it comes the sudden, overwhelming realization that everything about this situation is far more complicated than she thought. Her gaze slowly lifts back to him, searching his face for something that explains how this is possible, how the man standing in front of her, calm and composed, is also the unseen presence behind the cameras, the one who watched her make a decision she thought no one would ever notice. "You own this place?" she asks quietly, not because she doubts it, but because saying it out loud makes it real in a way she is not sure she is ready for. Daniel nods once, his expression steady, but there is a subtle shift in his eyes now, something more open, less distant than before, as if revealing that truth has changed the rules of whatever this is between them. "I do," he replies simply, his voice carrying no arrogance, just fact, and that somehow makes it more unsettling than if he had said it with pride. Sophie's fingers tighten slightly around the card before she sets it down on the table, her thoughts moving quickly now, connecting pieces she did not even know were part of the same puzzle. The camera, the note, the returned money, the quiet observation that now feels less like coincidence and more like intention. She exhales slowly, grounding herself before speaking again. "So you saw everything," she says, her tone calm but edged with something deeper, not anger exactly, but awareness. Daniel does not look away, does not pretend otherwise. "Yes," he answers, his honesty immediate, unfiltered. "I saw what happened, and I saw what you chose to do after," he adds, and there is something in the way he says it that makes it clear this was not just about the broken decanter. Sophie nods once, absorbing that, her gaze drifting briefly toward the ceiling before returning to him. "Then you already know why I left the money," she says, her voice steady, "because there is no point in explaining something he has already witnessed." Daniel studies her for a moment, then steps slightly closer, though still keeping a respectful distance. "I know what you did," he says, "but I wanted to understand why." And there it is, the question beneath everything. Not about the object, not about the cost, but about the choice itself. Sophie hesitates, not because she does not have an answer, but because the truth feels too simple for a situation that has become anything but. Because it was mine to fix, she says finally, her voice quiet but firm. No one else made that mistake. I did. So I take responsibility for it. She adds, her shoulders lifting slightly as if bracing for judgment that does not come. Daniel's expression shifts again, something softer this time, almost thoughtful, as if her answer confirms something he has been looking for longer than either of them realizes. And if I told you that the cost of that decanter is more than what you earn in a year, he asks, not to intimidate, but to test the weight of her conviction. Sophie does not flinch, does not look away. Then I would find a way, she replies without hesitation, and there is no bravado in her tone, just a quiet certainty that feels stronger than any argument. The silence that follows is different now, less tense, more focused, as if something important has just been placed on the table between them. Daniel exhales slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching the corner of his lips before he speaks again. That is exactly why I wanted to meet you, he says, and for the first time since he walked into the room. There is a hint of something more personal in his voice, something that goes beyond observation, beyond curiosity. Sophie tilts her head slightly, confusion flickering across her features. Because I broke something? She asks, a hint of disbelief in her tone. Daniel shakes his head once, his gaze steady. No, he says quietly. Because you did not try to pretend you did not. And in that moment, the entire situation shifts again, not as a confrontation, not as a punishment, but as the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. For a brief moment, Sophie says nothing, her mind trying to catch up with the shift in tone, in meaning, in everything this conversation has quietly become, because this is no longer about a broken object or a job she might lose. It is something else entirely, something she cannot yet define but can already feel. She crosses her arms lightly, not as a defense, but as a way to steady herself. Her eyes narrowing just slightly as she studies him more carefully now, no longer just a man in a tailored coat, but the owner of everything around her, the one who had the power to end this conversation before it even began, and yet chose not to. So what happens now? She asks, her voice even. But there is an undercurrent to it, a question layered beneath the question itself, one that is asking whether this is a test, a judgment, or something else entirely. Daniel does not answer immediately, his gaze drifting briefly toward the skyline beyond the glass walls, as if measuring his words against something larger than the moment, before returning to her with a quiet clarity that feels deliberate. That depends on you, he says, and the simplicity of the answer only deepens the tension, because it shifts the weight of the situation back onto her in a way she did not expect. Sophie exhales softly, a hint of disbelief touching her expression. I already told you what I would do, she replies, gesturing lightly toward the envelope. I will pay for what I broke, even if it takes time. Her voice firm, grounded in the only certainty she has left. Daniel nods once, acknowledging that, but his expression does not change. And if I told you I am not interested in your money? He asks, his tone calm, but the question lands heavier than it sounds. Sophie blinks, caught off guard by that, her brow furrowing slightly. Then I would not understand what this is about, she says honestly, because from her perspective, everything still points back to the same thing: responsibility, consequence, repayment. Daniel steps a little closer, closing just enough distance to make the moment feel more direct, more personal. It is about trust, he says quietly, and the word lingers in the air, unexpected, almost out of place in a conversation that started with a mistake. Sophie's expression shifts again, confusion giving way to something more cautious, because trust is not something she associates with people in his position, not in her world, not in situations like this. Trust? She repeats, her voice softer now, as if testing the weight of the word. Daniel nods, his gaze steady. I built everything I have by trusting numbers, systems, projections, he explains. But people are different, and lately, I have realized I have been trusting the wrong things when it comes to them. His voice carries a quiet honesty that does not feel rehearsed, and that alone makes it harder for her to dismiss. Sophie watches him closely, trying to understand where she fits into that statement, How her choice yesterday connects to something as abstract as trust, something she has had very little reason to believe in herself. "And you think I am different?" she asks, not out of pride, but out of genuine uncertainty, because she does not see anything extraordinary in what she did, only what she believed was necessary. Daniel's answer comes without hesitation. "I think you proved something most people never do when they think no one is watching," he says, and there is a quiet intensity behind his words now, something that goes beyond curiosity, beyond observation, something that feels closer to respect. Sophie looks down briefly, her fingers brushing against the edge of the table as she absorbs that, because part of her wants to reject it, to say it was nothing, that anyone would have done the same, but she knows that is not true. She has seen enough to know that. When she looks back up, her voice is steadier, more grounded. "Even if that is true, I still broke something," she says, holding on to the one fact that keeps this situation anchored in reality. Daniel gives a small, almost knowing nod, as if he expected that answer. "Yes, you did," he agrees. "But what you showed me matters more than what you broke." And with that, the balance shifts again, not away from consequence, but towards something that feels larger than it. Sophie's breath catches slightly, because for the first time since this started, the possibility of a different outcome, one she had not allowed herself to consider, begins to take shape, fragile but undeniable, and she is not sure whether to trust it or walk away before it disappears. The silence stretches just long enough to make Sophie aware of her own heartbeat, steady but louder now, as if it is trying to keep pace with the shift happening in front of her, because this moment no longer feels like an ending, it feels like a turning point, and that realization alone is enough to make her cautious. She studies Daniel carefully, searching for the angle, the condition, the hidden expectation that must come with words like his, because nothing in her experience has ever come without a cost, especially not from someone who owns a place like this. "If it matters more," she says slowly, her voice measured, "then what are you asking from me?" And there it is, the question that brings everything back into focus, because she needs to understand the terms before she allows herself to believe in anything beyond them. Daniel does not hesitate this time. His answer already formed, already decided. "I am offering you an opportunity," he says, his tone calm but deliberate, one that has nothing to do with cleaning this apartment. And for the first time since he revealed who he is, there is a clear direction in his words, something concrete. Sophie's brows draw together slightly, confusion flickering again as she processes that, because nothing about her current situation connects to the kind of opportunities men like him offer, at least not in any way she has ever seen. "I do not have the background for anything else," she replies honestly, not dismissing him, but grounding herself in reality, because she has learned the hard way that pretending to be something you are not only leads to bigger falls. Daniel nods, acknowledging that, but does not step back from his position. "You have something more valuable than a resume," he says, his gaze steady, "and that is much harder to find." His voice carries a quiet certainty that does not feel like persuasion, but conviction. Sophie exhales softly, her eyes dropping for a moment as she considers that, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the table again, grounding herself in something physical as her thoughts begin to shift, to open in ways she did not expect. "What kind of opportunity?" she asks finally, her voice quieter now, not because she is unsure, but because she is allowing herself to listen. Daniel takes a small step back, giving the space between them room to breathe again, as if understanding that this decision has to come from her, not from pressure. "I run a company that relies on people making decisions every day," he explains, "and most of those decisions are driven by numbers, efficiency, profit." He pauses briefly, his expression tightening just slightly. "But I have seen what happens when no one is thinking about the right thing, only the easy thing." His eyes return to hers, sharper now, more focused. "I want someone in that system who does not choose easy." And the weight of that statement lands heavier than any offer of money ever could. Sophie feels it immediately, the shift from transaction to trust, from repayment to responsibility, and it unsettles her in a different way, because this is not about fixing a mistake anymore. This is about stepping into something she has never imagined herself being part of. "You do not even know me," she says quietly, the doubt slipping through despite her effort to keep it steady. because this feels too big, too fast, too disconnected from the life she knows. Daniel does not argue with that, does not try to convince her otherwise. I know what you did when it mattered, he says, and that tells me more than most interviews ever could. His voice is calm, but there is a firmness beneath it that makes it clear he is not guessing. Sophie looks down again, her mind pulling her in two directions, one rooted in fear, in the familiarity of staying where she understands the rules, and the other pulling her towards something uncertain, something that feels almost impossible but not entirely out of reach. The envelope sits between them, untouched once more, a reminder of where this started, of the choice that brought her here, and slowly, she reaches for it, not to take the money, but to hold it for a second, feeling its weight, remembering what it cost her to leave it behind. She places it back down carefully, then lifts her gaze to meet his, something steadier now in her expression, not certainty, but willingness. And if I say yes, she asks, her voice quiet but clear, what happens to this? Her eyes flick briefly toward the place where the decanter once stood, because she has not forgotten, and she is not willing to move forward by ignoring it. Daniel follows her glance, then looks back at her, and for the first time, there is a faint, genuine warmth in his expression. Then we consider it settled, he says simply, because you already paid for it in a way that mattered more. And in that moment, the final piece of the tension begins to loosen, not disappear, but transform into something new, something that feels less like a test and more like a choice. For a moment, nothing moves, not the city outside the glass, not the air between them, not even the quiet rhythm of Sophie's breath as she stands there holding the weight of a decision that feels far bigger than the room they are in. Because this is no longer about what she broke, it is about what she chooses next. She looks at Daniel, really looks at him this time, not as the owner of the penthouse or the man behind the cameras, but as someone who is offering her something she has never been given before, a chance that is not built on pity or convenience, but on what she proved when she thought no one was watching. Her fingers relax at her sides, the tension that held her together slowly shifting into something steadier, something that feels less like fear and more like resolve. Then I say yes, she says. Finally, her voice quiet but clear, and the words do not echo. They settle, firm and real, because she knows exactly what they mean. Daniel does not react with surprise or celebration, only a small nod, as if he expected nothing less. But there is a subtle change in his posture, a slight easing of something he has been holding back, something that now has a place to go. Good. He replies simply, his tone calm. But there is a warmth beneath it that was not there before, not fully, not like this. Sophie exhales softly, the weight of the moment still present but no longer overwhelming. Because for the first time in a long time, the path in front of her is not defined by what she lacks, but by what she chose. Her eyes drift briefly to the envelope on the table, still sitting where it began this entire shift, and she reaches for it, not out of need, but out of closure, folding it carefully and placing it back into her bag, not as something owed, but as something returned. When she looks, from being observed to being seen, and it settles somewhere deep, somewhere she did not realize had been waiting for it. She nods once, not needing to say anything. Because some things do not require words to be understood, Daniel steps back slightly, giving her space again. But this time it does not feel like distance. It feels like respect, like a recognition of the line she never crossed, even when it would have been easier to do so. You start Monday, he continues, his tone returning to something more structured, more familiar. My assistant will send you the details. And just like that, the abstract becomes real, tangible, something she can step into. Sophie nods again, her mind already beginning to shift into a new rhythm, one that feels unfamiliar but not impossible, because she knows how to show up, she knows how to do the work, and more importantly, she knows who she is when it matters. She takes one last look around the penthouse, the place that had once felt like a world she did not belong in, and realizes that it is no longer something distant. It is simply a place where something changed. As she turns toward the door, Daniel's voice stops her one last time, softer now, less formal. Sophie, he says, and when she looks back, there is something in his expression that was not there before, something unguarded, something real. Thank you, he adds, not for the cleaning, not for the work, but for the choice she made when it counted. Sophie